Good evening, and welcome to tonight's live and interactive telephone town hall. Tonight I'm joined by the Alberta Pension Plan Public Engagement Panel, including panel chair Jim Dinning, panel members Mary Ritchie and Moyen Yaya. Before we hear from our speakers, let me start by explaining how this town hall will work. Right now, residents from across southern Alberta are connecting to the call, and soon you will have a chance to join the conversation. You can get in line to join the conversation right now or at any time by pressing *3 on your phone. You'll be connected to an operator who will ask for your name and your community. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing your comments live, you can ask the operator that you would like to have the moderator read your comments. We hope to use this time to have a two-way conversation about the Alberta Pension Plan. The panel wants to hear your ideas and your suggestions, as well as hear any questions you may have. I would now like to take the opportunity to welcome Jim Dinning, Chair of the Alberta Pension Plan Public Engagement Panel, to share a few opening remarks. Jim, go ahead. Your line is now open.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening to all of you, and thanks for joining in on our second town hall meeting. As Sarah said, my name is Jim Dinning. For 20 years, I served in the Alberta government as a public servant, then as a member of the Alberta Legislative Assembly and a cabinet minister until 1997. Today, I am in business and serve on corporate and not-for-profit boards of directors. We're joined together, as Sarah said, with my fellow panelists, both of whom are from Edmonton. Mary Ritchie is a respected chartered accountant and a corporate director. And interestingly enough, Mary was Alberta's first nominee to serve on the board of directors of the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. And Moyen Yaya is a highly regarded law professor at the University of Alberta, and Moyen served on the government's Fair Deal panel earlier in the decade. And it was that Fair Deal panel which partly got us here. They recommended the government examine an Alberta pension plan. So the government did. They commissioned a study from an independent Toronto-based pension expert. They were called Morneau Chappell at the time. They're now known as LifeWorks. And they asked them to crunch the numbers and see if an Alberta pension plan could work. LifeWorks came back with substantial findings, which the government published for everyone to read, and you can see it at albertapensionplan.ca. At the same time, the government created our independent panel to listen to Albertans and report back on what you said to us, what your reactions are to the report and the concept of an Alberta pension plan. Now, I left politics a quarter of a century ago, and even when I was a politician, I actually cared more about public policy than about politics. And that's why I agreed to chair this panel. Because for something this big, it's important to have a rational, adult conversation. These days, there aren't enough of those, so we wanted to make sure we had one here. For some people, the whole idea of an Alberta pension plan is a non-starter. No matter what, the answer is no, full stop. We hear you. For some people, the answer is yes, no matter what. More Alberta, less Ottawa is what they sometimes say, and we get that too. But for most people, the answer is maybe, but it just depends. And that's why we want to hear your comments tonight. What does it depend on? What concerns need to be addressed? What conditions need to be in place? We're not here as advocates. We are here as listeners. Less to answer your questions, more to hear your comments, because in the end, you are the jury. Our job is to tell the government, here is what Albertans told us, these are their thoughts and concerns. And then it will be up to the government to decide how it will proceed. I'm going to turn it over to my fellow panelists now, firstly to Mary Ritchie. Mary? Moyne, it looks like Mary may be having trouble with her mute button, so why don't we turn it to Moyne first, and then we'll come back to Mary.
Okay.
Moyne?
Yeah. Well, so as Jim mentioned, my name is Moyne. I'm a professor here at the University of Alberta of Law, and it was my privilege to be asked to serve on the Fair Deal panel, which the Premier at the time had impaneled to canvass the views of Albertans on how best to strengthen Alberta's position within Confederation. A separate pension plan was something we heard some strong voices in favor of, but we did not have all the information given that we were canvassing Albertans on a variety of issues. We didn't have enough information to give the government a clear answer one way or another. So we recommended to the government that to look into the question, do the math, do its homework, and then put the question to the people of Alberta via referendum. That was the Fair Deal panel report. And so that's why we are here now. The government has done its study and has created this panel to hear the views of Albertans and what they would like to see in an Alberta pension, if that's the route or the way they want to go. And just before I let Mary in, I just want to note, for constitutionally speaking, pensions are a provincial matter. When the provinces had gotten together back in the 1960s with the federal government and agreed to create a pension plan, the Canada Pension Plan, there was always the understanding that the provinces could get out if they chose to do so. And so all the provinces, except Quebec, decided to join back then, but other provinces, especially Ontario, said they want the right to leave if they choose to, and that right is in the Canada Pension Plan Act. So the Act talks about what needs to be done if a province decides to get out, and legally requires such province that wishes to exit to provide the same level of benefits and payouts as the Canada Pension Plan does. And it also provides a formula for how the assets will be divided once that province decides to exit. This means that it's not up to other provinces to stop Alberta if Alberta wishes to leave. But of course, there may be some political ramifications from this. The Canada Pension Plan is run by a board, the CPPIB, and it's sort of like a big giant hedge fund that takes all the contributions and invests it. And the formula in 1997 was updated in the Canada Pension Plan Act to include those returns that the investment board fund has generated. So the legal path is clear. The formula seems reasonably clear, and this may end up before the courts. That may happen before we get the exact number. But in terms of if you crunch the numbers according to the formula in the Act, we get the result that's in the LifeWorks report. We want to hear from you as to what parameters you think the panel should work with when recommending that the government decides to go ahead or not go ahead. Ultimately, it's the government's call whether there's going to be a referendum or not. But we, the panel members, are here to listen to your views on what you would like to see in or not. And I'm excited to have this conversation tonight. And I think Mary is now good, so I'll turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Moyne. Sorry for the technical issues. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Ritchie. In terms of background, my formal training is as a chartered accountant. And over the years, I've provided advice to many public and private companies, particularly regarding financial oversight and auditing. I also had the privilege, as Jim mentioned, of serving on the first board of directors of the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, which was created in 1997 to manage the assets of the CPP. So I bring a unique perspective to this, having been and experienced how the funds are managed right from its beginning. I know from experience how crucial it is for people's pension assets to be managed well. So that's an area where we really hope to gain insight tonight. If Alberta left the CPP and started an Alberta plan, there would be a huge pension fund to manage. I know people have different views about the size of Alberta's share, but regardless of the exact number, it would be significant. So a big question is, how would Albertans want this managed? Also, what would the oversight look like? How do you balance independence with accountability? What kind of mandate would be best? The CPP Investment Board has a mandate to achieve a maximum rate of return without undue risk of loss. Quebec does something similar with their plan, but they also allow the pension fund to be used to stimulate economic development in Quebec. Is that a model to consider? We really look forward to your feedback on this, as we will use it to develop our recommendations. And already, if you go to albertapensionplan.ca, we are developing a Q&A section with answers to some of the questions we've received so far, and we will be updating that as well. So thank you for tonight, and Jim, back to you.
Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Jim, and thanks to the Alberta Pension Plan Public Engagement Panel for your opening remarks. And for those of you who may have just connected, welcome to tonight's telephone town hall about the Alberta Pension Plan. We're joined this evening by panel chair Jim Dinning and panel members Mary Ritchie and Moyen Yaha. If you would like to join the conversation right now or at any time during the town hall, you can do so by pressing *3 on your phone. And for those of you listening online, please enter your comment directly into the portal in front of you in the online. To start the conversation tonight, the panel would like to ask a quick poll question. Okay? For those joining by phone, I will now direct your attention to the keypad. After I have asked the question, you can choose the answer by selecting the corresponding number on your phone keypad. Please listen to all of the answers before you make your selection. And for those of you listening online, you will see the poll on the portal, and you can choose your answer directly right there. Our first question this evening is, what concerns you most about an Alberta pension plan? You can press 1 for how the asset fund will be managed. 2, whether my pension will be lower than the CPP. 3, whether my pension will follow me if I move in or out of Alberta. 4, I don't have enough information yet. So again, the question is, what concerns you most about an APP? You can press 1 for how the asset fund will be managed. 2, whether my pension will be lower than the CPP. 3, whether my pension will follow me if I move in or out of Alberta. And 4, that I don't have enough information yet. The results from these quick polls, this quick poll and all quick polls, will be reflected in the panel's final report. Giving you just another moment to complete your polling on the first question before I prepare for the second. Thank you. Our second question this evening is, what interests you the most about an Alberta pension plan? Again, I draw your attention to your keypad where you can respond. What interests you most about an Alberta pension plan? 1, the possibility of lower pension premiums for larger paychecks. 2, the possibility of higher pension payments for seniors. 3, having our pension assets and options under Alberta's jurisdiction. 4, the possibility of spin-off jobs and a stronger financial sector in Alberta. I'll repeat those again one more time. The question is, what interests you most about an Alberta pension plan? 1, the possibility of lower pension premiums for larger paychecks. 2, the possibility of higher pension payments for seniors. 3, having our pension assets and options under Alberta's jurisdiction. 4, the possibility of spin-off jobs and a stronger financial sector in Alberta. Thank you for participating in those quick polls this evening. And I would now like to get started with the first participant. We have a live caller from Lethbridge. This is Virginia listening live in Lethbridge. Virginia, go ahead. Your line is now open.
Hi. In 2019, the Alberta Treasury Board commissioned a report regarding the Alberta Pension Plan. In their report, they found that dollars owing to Alberta from CPP would be roughly $32.5 billion, with $165 billion in liabilities. How do you square that LifeWorks now says that we are owed 10 times that value, which is 53% of all the assets in the CPP?
Thanks, Virginia. I'll ask Jim Dinning to please go ahead.
Hi, Virginia, and thanks for the call and for the question. Look, I'll admit I haven't seen that 2019 report, so I'm relying on the most recent one done by a certified professional actuarial scientist. In this case, it was Morneau Chappelle, now known as LifeWorks. And if you look at pages 48 and 49 of the report, they went through the numbers line by line over 56 plus years. And it shows on those pages that in every year but 8 years, the number to Alberta workers and employers was minus the amount that was drawn from the fund to pay benefits under the CPP, that amount over that 56 years added up to $60 billion of over contributions by Alberta workers and employers. In other words, there was $60 billion more put in over those 56 years than was paid out. And then you combine that with compound interest, and the number they concluded at 2021 was a little over $275 billion. And these are actuaries. These are actuarial scientists who certify their work. And that's what, frankly, Virginia, what hooked me on thinking there's some there. And it was something that Albertans should see and have this kind of a debate. Does that help, Virginia, with to give you some of the answer you need?
Not really, because we are not looking at the Alberta Treasury report either. So I don't imagine that they got their numbers just pulling them out of the hat. I assume the Alberta Treasury Board would have looked at all of this also. To me, it doesn't make sense that when we have roughly 12% of the population, that Alberta expects that we're going to get half of the Canada pension.
I get you. I'll admit, it seems implausible. I'll grant you that. But the fact is that we have a younger population with higher than average earnings, with more people actually working, and less of us drawing benefits from that pool from the CPP. And all of you add all that up over 56 plus years, and what it spits out, the actuaries have crunched these numbers carefully, and they've spelled it out. They estimate by 2027 that it will be 334. I'm sorry you don't believe that number. There are others. There's only one other that's done a study, and that's Trevor Toome from the University of Calgary. And Trevor's come up with a number that's anywhere between $125 and $150 billion. But nobody else has come up with a recent number to tell us what that actual number is. So the government has gone with the professional actuaries that did this report.
Thanks very much, Jim. We're going to keep the conversation going. I have another live listener. JP is listening from Bragg Creek. JP, go ahead. Your line's open.
Hi there. I'm very concerned that the full process seems to be an outcome in search of legitimization. My key question is, how close will the government be in deciding What happens as far as investment goes? With the Canada Pension Plan, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board makes choices without political interference. How involved will the politicians be involved in making investment decisions?
Hi, Mary here. Thank you for your question. You are correct that the CPP Investment Board has been without interference from government. I will say, though, there has been suggestions that they will start investing in more green investments. The government has been suggesting that. It hasn't happened, but there's a suggestion it could happen. What would happen is you'd have to make sure it was independent, like the CPP, and that those monies would be kept separate. Currently, Alberta does manage pension portfolios, about $110 billion in public service pensions, and in those there is no political interference. So like you, that would be an essential thing for me as part of this, that it was managed in the best interest of the stakeholders, those of us who have contributed to the pension plan. I hope that answers your question here. These things are going to have to be worked out. And again, keep looking at that Q&A section in the Alberta Pension Plan.ca section, where we're going to try to flesh these out more.
Thanks very much, Mary. Let's keep the conversation going. Our next question here comes through from an online listener. This is from Bev, and Bev says, will there definitely be a referendum? So perhaps I'll ask Jim for you to please go ahead.
Well, Bev, thanks for the question. What the Premier has said is that we're to go out and do this listening exercise and come back with what we've heard and recommendations back to the government. And on the basis of that report, the government will decide if they're going to proceed, if they want to proceed with a pension plan, then they would call the referendum. That is, she's made that clear in the last week. And the jury is still out, and the people of Alberta are in fact the jury. What we hear back, we'll tell the government what we heard, and then they will decide at that point if they want to proceed with it. The Albertans in the end will decide by way of referendum.
Thanks, Jim. And for anyone who is just connecting tonight, if you would like to join the conversation, you can do so right now or at any time by pressing *3, and you'll be routed to an operator. For anyone who is listening live online, you can simply submit your comments, suggestions, or any other feedback in the online portal. The next individual is listening on the phone from Lethbridge. This is Patrick. Patrick, please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yes, well, I was just wondering about why change what is already working, and also why wouldn't we be concentrating on things that are already issues in Alberta to just better the province, but also stay connected with Canada?
Thanks, Patrick. Perhaps I'll ask Jim to start, and then if there's additional dialogue from the panel, I know that they will also contribute.
I was going to say, Moyne, do you want to take that question? I think that's up your alley.
Sure. That's the feedback that the first panel, the Fair Deal panel, heard from Albertans about how to strengthen Alberta's position within Confederation. So there was a view amongst many Albertans that we were not getting our fair deal from Confederation. We weren't getting our fair share of in terms of what's taken out of the province in terms of taxation, and then what's going back in terms of economic benefits. There was a perception that there's perhaps a hostile central government that was picking on Alberta. So the feedback we got was that why should we be essentially subsidizing the rest of the country with our inflated premiums, and we're putting a surplus into the pool of money that the rest of the country gets to benefit from. So that was the sort of the impetus from the Fair Deal Panel report. The Fair Deal Panel report didn't want to just recommend it just for the sake of strengthening our position in Alberta, but wanted a careful study done. So the panel recommended to the government to engage in the study, which they did with the LifeWorks report. But that's why we're here. We want to hear your views on is this something you're interested in, and is this something you want to proceed with? Jim?
Patrick, does that help? Does that give you an answer, or have you got something else you want to add?
Well, I just believe that we live in the best province in Canada. Lethbridge has been an incredible place to raise a family and to make money and to contribute to Canada as well as Alberta. So I'm always open to suggestions of what would make life better for Albertans. But I also have a problem with the actual numbers that we've come up with. Like, it seems to me to be a real large portion of the CPP that we were basing this on, and the math doesn't add up in my mind.
And so, Patrick, what you're saying is you don't believe the numbers. And even if they're smaller, you're still reluctant to leave the CPP and join an APP. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It just strikes me that what the government concluded on the basis of Moyne's panel was, let's go do the arithmetic. And the arithmetic showed that Albertans, not Alberta or the government, but Albertans over-contributed $60 billion over those 50 plus years. And do you think is it fair or right to have that kind of number out there for debate, or so Albertans truly understand?
I think it's always good to discuss everything, but I just want to make sure that the math is correct. And also, I've always, ever since I was a kid, I was under the understanding that if you're blessed to be in the most powerful province, that you would contribute to all of Canada, because some provinces were struggling. And I've always had a job. I've always been paid very well. And I always believed that Canada should be joined together and be strengthened together, as opposed to just what's best for me in my corner of Canada.
Well, thank you, Patrick. You made a good point. We're going to make note of it. And Sarah, why don't we go to another caller?
You got it, Jim. The next question comes actually in from Stephen, who's listening online. And Stephen says, can you guarantee that the APP fund will not run out of funds? So perhaps I'll go back to Moyen on that, and then see if there's any other responses from the panel.
Well, you can never guarantee that any fund runs out of money, which is true of the CPP fund, by the way. So anytime you have active fund managers, which is what the CPP is, it's a big hedge fund, investing your money, there's always the risk there. But the question is, what best practices would the government set up to ensure that the APP fund is set up and managed in a similar or better way than the CPP IB? So that's part of what we're trying to hear from you. If that is a concern that you have, and it's a concern we've been hearing some in the other panel, town hall we had, that's the kind of thing that this panel would recommend to the government, that if they set up a pension plan, they should set up legislation to ensure that it's managed in a sound and prudent manner, so that there's always enough money in the Alberta Pension Plan Fund that ensures that payouts can be made and the money can be continuously invested to generate reasonable returns to fund both the liabilities and keep taking on the premiums. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moyen. Keeping the conversation going, the next caller is Rita, and Rita's listening on the phone tonight from Colehurst. Rita, please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yes, I'm just also wondering about those people that have contributed in the past to the Canada Pension Plan and now perhaps are in a independent business and are not contributing. How will those funds be? Will they get benefit from those funds that they've previously contributed?
Hi, Rita. It's Mary here. The monies that you put into the CPP at any point in your career follow you. And so you would still be getting the benefit of those, whether you stopped contributing or went back to contribute. But those are your monies that you've put away. I hope that answers your question, Rita.
And if that's the way it goes, that would.
I'm sorry, I lost part of what you said.
I said that would transfer over then to the Alberta Pension Plan if that's the way Alberta goes. Those monies would
correct.
Follow in. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make one comment too, and I agree with Patrick and what he was saying in Lethbridge here. Like, we have to not forget about being part of Canada, and I am very much in favor of that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Rita, thanks for that. I get you. I think that I'd say proudly, after living in this province for the last 70 plus years, minus 2 years that I was in Quebec, that Alberta is a major contributor to the country. You and I, all of us, pay income taxes. That business that you were talking about, it pays income taxes. I don't think anybody can accuse any Albertans of being slouches when it comes to making an honest contribution to the dominion of Canada. And I think the government felt, and Moyen was part of the panel that recommended it, that doing some number crunching to show this one program where Albertans have shown to be over contributors once again underscores that massive, sometimes over contribution that Albertans make. And so while I agree with you, I'm a Canadian. And back to your first question, I lived in Quebec for 2 years, and I know that my pension account identifies those 2 years that I worked in Quebec, and that the small amount of money I was actually making contributes to part of my monthly pension check today. So that true up between the QPP and the CPP was done at the time that I retired, but those funds flowed from Quebec to the Canada Pension Plan, just as they would if it was in the case of an Alberta pension plan. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Jim. Moving along to the next caller. This is Scott from Medicine Hat. Scott, please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Thank you guys for taking my call tonight. I just want to say quickly before I ask my question that it really doesn't matter how many actuary scientists or whatever tell us what we should get. We have no control over how much money, the 53%, 20%, whatever we get from CPP. We can say it all we want, but it doesn't matter. So considering the entire premise of an Alberta pension plan is a complete fabrication of anything that would even resemble reality, what is the provincial government going to do should it somehow convince Albertans to pull out of a CPP, and the inevitability of what we already know is going to happen, which is we won't get 53%. So what do we do? What do you tell Albertans when we walk away with as low as 10%, 12%, 15%? Do we have some kind of a clause that Albertans get sucked into this and we don't get 53%? Can we undo this referendum that people are being lied to in order to vote on?
Scott, are you saying that you would want to know the number before you vote?
I think every Albertan wants to know the number before they vote. That's what 3/4 of the phone calls have been about tonight. The 53%, like Jim, I could tell listen, I could tell my boss tomorrow that I'm worth $100,000. I know exactly how much money the company makes. I know how much money I make for him. What do you think he's going to say to me when I tell him I need to double my salary? He's going to say, great. No, is exactly what the people who control the CPP are going to say when we go at them and say, we want 53%. What Alberta says we are entitled to is irrelevant. And if we don't have an actual number from the people who control the CPP of what we would get if we pull out, any referendum is based on a lie. And I want to know, if we have the referendum without knowing that number, is there a pullout clause for Albertans so that we can undo this? Because people are going to believe that we are going to get half of this money. And everyone here, including yourselves, knows there's no world, none, where Alberta gets half of the Canada pension plan. We're not, it's based on insanity. So yes, I want to know what an actual number would be before I vote.
Thanks so much, Scott. And in the interest of making sure we hear from as many people as we can this evening, I want to give the panel an opportunity to respond so we can keep the conversation going. Thank you for that valuable feedback. Jim, would you like to reflect on Scott's comments?
I think I'd put Scott down as he doesn't believe that is the right number. I get that he thinks it's highly implausible. And what he does need is he needs to know what the number is before there's a vote.
Thanks very much. The next question comes in from Sharon, and Sharon's listening online. I'll go ahead and read the question. Will there be consideration for surviving partner to receive their pension in the event of the death? Perhaps I could start with Mary on that.
Yes, thank you, Sharon. Last week when we had this conversation, I mentioned that I am a surviving partner, and the amount I get from the CPP it's been a blessing and very helpful. And the Alberta pension plan would have to have the same benefits as the CPP. That would be part of the legal requirement of any new provincial pension. So it would mirror that. So thank you, Sharon, for your question.
Thanks very much for that. The next caller is Jerry from Lethbridge. Jerry's listening live on the phone. So Jerry, go ahead. Your line is open.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. The first thing that I want to mention is that this consultation process is a perfect example of direct democracy in action, where Albertans are being asked to provide their views and opinions on an issue that hasn't even been finally decided, which is why we're going through this, to get everybody's opinion. But I have three quick questions. Number one, will an Albertan receive less money under an Alberta pension plan than they presently receive under the Canada pension plan? Number two, what is the cost estimate for administrating an Alberta pension plan? Because we know, for example, that there's a Canada Pension Plan Investment Fund, and the chief executive officer, who lives in Montreal, by the way, and is a political appointment by the federal Liberal government, makes $375,000 a year plus benefits. That's not too shabby. So what is the cost estimate for an Alberta pension plan? And the final thing is, even before this entire process has finished and the government has listened to Albertans and held a referendum, if it deems appropriate, and introduced a bill in the Alberta legislature which needs to be passed, there's a lot of fear-mongering coming out of Ottawa these days. And it's about money. And the Prime Minister even admits that in the statement he made last week, where he talks about uncertain times and the cost of living. Oh gosh, I wonder who's responsible for that. So if a Quebec pension plan is good enough for Quebec, and nobody in the federal Liberal government in Ottawa is criticizing a Quebec pension plan, and what Quebecers receive as a have-not province, why isn't an Alberta pension plan good enough for Albertans where the money stays at home where it belongs?
Thanks very much, Jerry. I'll pass that over to the panel for their response.
Well, I will start, Jerry, with your first question, which will an Albertan receive less? And the answer to that is no. And the report suggests Albertans might receive slightly more, or the cost may be slightly less, the premiums that have to be paid. In terms of cost estimate of administering a fund, Alberta already administers, as I said before, 100 billion of pension funds. There are administration costs. There might be a whole new management team set up. I suspect our costs would be a little bit less in Alberta than they are in other provinces in terms of some of that overhead, but that would yet to be determined. So I think those are really good observations. And the last is in terms of the political issues, I think those are best left to the politicians to argue about, but your point is well taken. Thank you, Jerry.
Moyne, do you want to talk to Jerry about the CPP, Alberta pension plan, vis-a-vis the Quebec pension plan? Anything you want to add there?
Nothing. I mean, I echo, actually, I agree with what the caller said. Quebec has managed to run its pension plan, and there are other countries, smaller countries in the world that run their own pension plans. There are U.S. states that run their pension plans, so for their staff and for the civil service in their various jurisdictions. So I think it is doable. It's really, at the end of the day, a question of political desire by Albertans if they wish to go a separate way.
Right.
Thanks very much for that comment, Moyen. I'm going to keep the conversation going with a comment that's come in from an online listener. This is from Mark, and Mark says, we need more exact information before a referendum can be called. Negotiate with the rest of Canada and then give us exact numbers before putting it to a vote. Thanks for that, Mark. Go ahead, Jim.
Mark, good point. You're looking for more information. And as for the negotiation, it isn't a negotiation with the rest of Canada. Alberta has, as spelled out in the legislation in 1966, has the authority to leave the Canada Pension Plan and establish an Alberta pension plan. It was spelled out in the legislation 57 years ago. All the premiers agreed to that and wanted that in there so that if they ever chose to leave, they could leave as if they had established their own pension plan in 1966. So earlier callers, I think Sharon and Scott, talked about getting whatever the number is. There will be a negotiation, and as Moyne has said, it may end up in the courts. But the fact is that Alberta is entitled to a sum of money of that estimated $600 billion fund that come 2027 is when they did the calculation. And we're entitled to that, to a share, a portion, to be determined. And what you and perhaps others are saying, I know Scott felt that way, that you absolutely had to have a number before we went to the vote. And we understand that. We've got that written down loud and clear.
Thanks very much, Jim. The next caller is Patrick, and Patrick is listening on the phone tonight from Cochrane. Patrick, go ahead. Your line is now open.
My name's Patrick, and I'm wondering, hello, my name's Patrick, and I'm wondering, what is a pension plan, and how would that affect Canada or Alberta leaving Canada?
Mary, that sounds like a young caller. Why don't you take a stab at it, and Moyne and I may back you up. They add on.
Thank you, Patrick. And great question. What is a pension plan? And you're very wise to be thinking about this as a young person, because the earlier you contribute to a pension plan or into a savings plan for yourself, you get the time value of compound interest. And the earlier you can start, the bigger amount you'll have when you get to retirement and you want to stop working or you have to stop working. So that is what a pension plan is. Moyen, did you want to take the next part? I think you were saying, how would this affect Alberta leaving Canada? But this isn't about Alberta leaving Canada. This is simply about taking our share of an existing pension plan and rehoming it to be entirely owned by Albertans. So it's not about leaving Canada. Moyen, did you want to comment on that, though?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not about leaving Canada. It was put to us by the people who gave us feedback in the Fair Deal panel that this was a way of strengthening our position in Confederation. That if we brought our share of the CPP-IB or the CPP fund back to Alberta and administered it locally, that would be a better way of strengthening our position within Confederation. And that was the mandate of the Fair Deal panel. So this is not meant to be some backdoor to independence.
I think, Patrick, what the government is trying to do is say, look, Albertans, this is a fund this is a savings account, as Mary said, and it's a long-term savings account. Albertans have over contributed to that savings account that for all Canadians, and we've identified how much is Albertans' share. And what the government is asking us to do is ask Albertans, do you think it's time for us to go and get our fair share and establish our own Alberta long-term savings plan that I'm sure your parents might be helping you put a few dollars aside every week or every month so that you've got a few extra dollars to go off to university or college when you're finished school.
Thanks very much for that conversation there. I'm going to keep things moving along. The next caller is Eleanor. Eleanor's listening on the phone tonight from Canmore. Eleanor, go ahead. Your line's open.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, and thank you to the panelists for taking on the conversation on such a somewhat difficult topic. Most of my questions, well, my main question had been answered, and that was really about, will you lose access to what you've already contributed to the Canadian pension plan? But I think I echo other callers in saying there's so much unknown in this conversation that before I would be comfortable making any decision, would need to know what the actual numbers are and also what it looks like for the pension in the long term, and see those actual numbers, not based on estimated calculations in the reports. So thank you for tonight and the conversation.
Eleanor, Mary here, if I could make a comment. The report, which is really worth having a good read of, the basis for all the numbers comes from either Statistics Canada, the Canada Pension Plan Chief Actuary, or the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. So the actuaries are using real numbers to come up with their numbers. At this point, these are that we have. But if you keep looking at that albertapensionplan.ca, we're going to try to keep answering your questions. But at this point, I think these are the best known numbers that we can work with. Thank you.
That's right. Simply add to Mary that the government and we actually have encouraged others who've got these numbers and have done the analysis. Give us your number. If you don't like this number, whether it's the federal government or whether it's the CPP Investment Board itself, tell us what Albertans' number would be, given that Alberta has the authority to exit the plan with its share of the CPP coming to an APP. So we would encourage others to come up with scientific numbers as soundly prepared as the Morneau-Chappelle report has been prepared, a company out of Toronto that's prepared this analysis.
Thanks very much for that, Jim. Keeping the conversation going, the next question comes from Vinday, who's listening in Calgary this evening. I think I have your line now open, Vinday. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this call. So I have two questions. One question is, given the current market scenario of how it is, and if we go ahead with Alberta pension plan, what happens in the downturn when there's a downturn in the market and with all this money, and if something happens to it? So what happens to the pension? That's one thing. And second thing is just an idea I just thought to share. Sorry if it is not it is not the right podium or the right person. Is supposing we had, like, say, 100% of the Alberta pension plan, right? And if we keep a 10% cap, which if we are agreeing to the federal policies, we can release that 10%. Otherwise, the 100% is ours. I don't know. It's just a thought which I had. I thought I should share it on the group. So, but yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Mary, you want to take a stab at that?
Vinday, thank you for your comments. And market scenarios, market turndowns are scary as they happen, and they do affect investment portfolios, including the CPP Investment Board. And we've seen since the beginning of stock markets that those downturns happen. There are rallies, but it is certainly something that an investment manager would have to consider. Not all the money would be in public stock markets. They invest in real estate and buildings. They invest around the world in order to try to manage that market risk. So it is definitely something that would have to be managed as part of this portfolio. I hope that answers your question, Vinday.
Can I just take the carrot approach? I'm not exactly sure. Is Vinday still on the line?
I am.
Vinday?
Yes,
when you
I am.
About a carrot,
yeah.
When you talked about a carrot, what were you thinking of when you said?
So, there are certain policies, I guess, which our Alberta government doesn't agree with the federal government, right? So, at that point of time, that money, that certain percentage of money, isn't released back to the federal kitty. It remains with the Alberta government. But in case if we have agreeable policies which Albertans agree with the federal government, then we can release them. Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Vinday, I would say this, that what the CPP Investment Board has is in its legislation, it has a set of, it's a ring fence to protect it from the political intrusion. So somebody says you don't want the politicians to get their sticky fingers on those savings, that savings account that our young caller asked about a few minutes ago. So it's to put investments to achieve the highest possible returns, where there will be no transfer from the Alberta pension plan sort of as a carrot or a payback to the CPP, except when somebody leaves Alberta and moves to Ontario to retire, then that person's Alberta assets would move to help pay for his pension or her pension when she moves to Ontario. But the only other comment I would make is that one of the things that's been suggested is that the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board could be asked, at least at the outset, to manage these investment funds in a Canada account and an Alberta account, but it would keep those funds would stay for a time and be responsibly invested. Nobody has questioned or disputed the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board performance, and it could well be that if they agreed to it, that Alberta's assets could stay there for a period of time after the APP was established.
Thanks very much, Jim. The next comment and question come in from Ron. Ron was listening online tonight and says, would our expenses to manage the plan be significantly lower because we have such a small number of participants compared to the overall CPP plan? Thanks for that question, Ron. I'll ask Mary to go ahead.
Hi, Ron. I'm not sure if the expenses would be lower. There's a certain cost to just setting up a portfolio management and then managing funds. So I'm not sure if that would be correct or not. Jim, what are your thinking on that?
It would only be, and Wayne may have a comment here too, but it would be a percentage of the actual assets in the Alberta pension plan. One of the measurements of performance is the lowest possible cost, a percentage of, let's say, a $300 billion or a $200 billion fund. For them to get anywhere close to 1% of the fund as their annual cost would be put them way out of bounds. That in fact, some of the best managers, Mary, you could comment on this, would be sort of down in the 0.5% cost of managing funds.
Exactly.
Is that not right?
That is correct. And if you look at all sorts of funds, whether they're even not-for-profit, like community foundations, that is what they aim for, is a very low-cost administrative cost. And that would definitely have to be the mandate in Alberta as well.
Thanks for that, Mary.
And Ron, I would add that they're already administering pensions to public servants, to firemen, to policemen, to local authorities and universities and colleges. So there's already a built-in administration system in the province who are administering pensions and benefits today.
Thanks very much for that, Jim. Moving on to the next caller. This is Marilyn, and Marilyn's listening on the phone tonight from Lethbridge. Marilyn, please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi there. How are you this evening?
Good, Marilyn. Thanks for calling.
All right. So just a couple of quick questions here. When you have the CPP, you also receive your old age security with it. So what becomes of that? Is the Alberta pension going to be able to continue with the old age security add-on, or?
Potentially you might receive 2 checks, but you would not lose the old age security.
As I understand it, Mary, the old age security program is a federal benefit program that is administered side by side the CPP, but it is a separate and a separately funded program, not funded by a CPP or by an Alberta pension plan. So as we understand it, Marilyn, the old age security program would not change if there was an Alberta pension plan.
Thanks for that, Jim. And thanks very much for the dialogue, Marilyn. Moving on to the very next caller, this is Tarek, and Tarek is listening tonight from Calgary. Tarek, please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Hi there. I'd like to start with a personal opinion. Alberta reaps the benefits of bringing in young people from all across Canada. I always find it a little surprising when we hear Albertans this, Albertans that. But we're still Canadians at the end of the day. I disagree with the premise of prioritizing the money coming in from Alberta when it has so much to do from pulling on resources from other parts of Canada. I don't think it does much to breed unity, and I think it really just stokes division. My main question to deal with this is I've been hearing a lot about the Quebec model, and when Quebec decided not to join CPP, well, Quebec's population now is much older than when they decided not to join CPP, and as such, I've heard that they have to pay a lot more into it. I'm not sure I've heard much about what might happen if Alberta's population doesn't stay quite as young as it is now, and I just want to know if that has been taken into account with any of the planning of this, because otherwise I think it might seem kind of short-sighted. Thank you.
Moyne, do you want to talk a little bit about the first part of Terrence's question?
Well, so the Quebec plan is a bit different in that it also prioritizes investments in Quebec. So that may have, dragged down some of the returns that the QPP has been getting. If you force an investment plan to go into certain locations and certain projects, you're going to not necessarily get the best return. And so that's one of the things that the panel is, based on your question, would recommend, depending on all the feedback we get to the government, that any Alberta pension plan set up should not be mandated to invest here or there, but rather go and seek the best rate of return for Albertans, regardless of where that rate of return is located. And the LifeWorks actually report does have some of that projections in there about what would happen if our demographics shift. I'll say two things. The demographic shifts don't take place overnight. So in terms of the initial impact of if we did exit, it would not be much, because we would have the amount of money that is owed to us by the formula in the CPP Act. And then that would allow us to either pay out higher benefits or charge lower premiums, or a combination thereof. In the long run, if our demographics start looking like Quebec's demographics, I'll note that the contribution that Quebec pays is about 1% higher than what the rest of Canada pays. It's about 9.5% or 9.9% versus 10.9% in Quebec. And that's with 50 or 60 years of cumulative slowdown in growth and changing demographics. So I'm optimistic that Alberta is going to keep that rate of growth, both in terms of demographics and in terms of the economic performance. And the key is avoiding any mandate that Alberta would invest only in Alberta or a certain amount in Alberta. Rather, go seek the best returns everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Moyne. Moving on to the next question. This is submitted from Pat, who's listening online. And Pat says, what would happen to a person who worked and contributed all their life to CPP in Alberta, but retired in New Brunswick? So, Jim, do you want to start on that one? And then we can go ahead with others if needed.
Moyne or Mary, I think, tried to answer this a little earlier, and they can answer it better than I can. So I'm going to pass it to one of those two. Mary? You're on mute.
Mary's having trouble unmuting.
Thank you. After all this time with COVID, you think we'd be better with the unmute button, but I don't seem to be able to quite find it quickly like you did, Jim. With the portability, I believe is the question that you're asking about the fund. Currently, there is portability. If you work in Alberta, retire in Alberta, you would have much of your funds still originally from the CPP Investment Board that would form part of this new Alberta Pension Fund, but portability would have to be negotiated. And again, we're looking at getting questions on how that might happen onto that albertapensionplan.ca area. Moyne, do you have a thought on that?
No, that's correct. If somebody's working all their life in Alberta and they move to another province, the Alberta government, if it moved ahead with a separate pension plan, would negotiate portability agreements with the CPP, if it's the CPP or the QPP, just as there are portability agreements between the CPP and the QPP currently. And that happens even with public sector pensions and other things like that. So these agreements are easy to set up and administer. So I don't think that would be a concern.
Partly because, Pat, there are as many people who leave the province. In fact, Alberta has been a net recipient. It's grown by virtue of in-migration.
Thanks, Jim. Sounds like you've got just a bit of a hiccup with your audio there.
In fact, in the last 5 months, more people who are older have moved in.
Thanks, Jim. Sounds like we were just having a bit of an issue with your audio there. I know that you have some important comments to share. However, in the interest of time, with so few minutes left to go, I want to keep the conversation moving along. Okay, our next caller is Robert, who's listening live in Medicine Hat. Robert's on the phone with us this evening. Robert, we've lost your connection. I'm going to go ahead and read Robert's question, okay? It says, what's the predicted number per month, and what will they receive for an average single Albertan? Thanks for that input, and sorry that we've lost Robert in this time. But Jim, are you there and you want to go ahead? I think we still have a technical issue with Jim. Moyen, do you have an update you would like to provide to Robert from Medicine Hat, who was curious about the predicted number per month, and what will they receive for an average single Albertan?
I'm assuming by number he means what is the benefit that will be paid out. If that's the case, it should be no less than what the CPP currently pays. So if Alberta goes its separate way by legislation, we're supposed to provide, an Alberta pension plan would have to provide the same benefits that the CPP provides. So that would be the floor in terms of what so you would get whatever you would receive currently under the CPP. And then the bigger question is if our premiums can fall. So from those who are paying in, the question would become, are we going to pay in less to get the same benefits, or are we going to pay the same and maybe get higher benefits? That's the sort of the question that the government will have to make. Perhaps based on some of the feedback that we get from you that we would put in our recommendation.
So
thanks very much.
The maximum amount today is about $1,300, and the average CPP pension paid today is about $750 across the country. So Albertans are up above that amount. But as Moyen said, that number would not fall. It cannot fall. The law of the land says that it must be the same as or better. And that's one of the questions the government is asking, that if there was a large amount of money that came in as assets to the Alberta pension plan, would you want higher benefits? Would you want lower contribution rates, or a combination of both? And again, the number matters because it will determine how much of extra benefits or lower contribution rates the Alberta pension plan could afford.
Thanks very much, Jim. It's coming through loud and clear now. I'm going to keep the conversation going to our next live listener, and this is Diana in Airdrie. Diana, please go ahead. Your line is now open. Diana, if you're there, perhaps you might need to unmute because we're not hearing your line, but your line is now open. Hi. Please try again.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So you've talked about Alberta
already
managing a huge fund, but it seems as though AIMCO, which manages the provincial pensions, has averaged about 7.2% return, whereas the CPP is about 10%. And at one point in 2021, they were at 1.7%. So who's going to manage this fund? And is it going to be someone other than AIMCO? Because to date, they haven't done particularly well.
If I,
Diana, it's Jim. It's Jim. Oh, Mary, why don't you take that?
well, I was going to just say that there is the possibility that this fund would continue to be managed by the CPP Investment Board, or a new entity would be created. I can't speak to AIMCO results and what has happened to them, but certainly the portfolio manager has to have a good risk program and diversity program in order to manage and have the best returns.
But Diana, we note the concern that of the comparison. That's not for us to opine upon, other than to say that one of the options, as Mary said, is for the CPPIB to continue to manage these funds, at least in the transition period, until we're confident that we have an organization that will be able to manage and perform as well, hopefully even better than the CPP Investment Board.
Thanks very much for that. The next caller is Paul, and Paul's listening tonight in Lethbridge. Paul, please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Good evening, everybody. One of my questions is that in the very start of the conversation, the calculations, there was something about what was it? Compounded interest of what we've put into the fund. How can there be compounded interest if the money's already been spent on CPP? I don't understand that part. And number two is the questions in the surveys and stuff. They seem skewed towards what you want to find is that this is a good thing. Because I couldn't answer the second question tonight, honestly, because there wasn't a thing about I need more information before I could see what I want in a Alberta pension.
Paul, can I take the first part of Paul's question? Paul, if you look at the report, you'll see line by line the amount of money that Albertans, not the Alberta government, but you as a worker and your employer as an employer has put in. For instance, in 2016, there was $8 billion worth of contributions by Albertans, and the amount that was actually paid out in benefits to pensioners and others was a little less than $5 billion. So that's $3 billion of over contribution. That's what gets multiplied with compound interest, because there is more money left in the savings account at the end of the year than there was at the start of the year. And that's how Morneau Chappelle came up with a number of $334 billion, is because of the over contributions plus the compound interest on that accumulated net positive.
Thanks very much, Jim, and thanks for that comment there. The next listener is from Stephen, and Stephen's listening tonight in Lethbridge. Stephen, please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Hi, good night. I want to start off by saying I'm loving the idea. I think it's brilliant. It falls right in line with my line of work, and I think this is great. Some people have already touched on what I wanted to say, but the report didn't speak specifically to how this will attract and retain population in Alberta that we need to build and diversify the industry. I wanted to get the panel's opinion on that, how we can implement this to make sure that we get more people and the right people in Alberta. And then the other thing was I wanted to know if there's been any discussions as to a minimum mix of investments we would keep in Alberta so that we can use it to invest in Alberta industries and diversify. But at the same time, obviously, you want to keep it diversified enough that you can reach out of the province and international markets. So I didn't know if we'd touched on that entirely yet.
We haven't touched on it so much, but other than to say any plan would have to have have lots of diversity in terms of its investment around the world and different asset classes like real estate and shares, and as it currently is being managed by the CPP Investment Board.
Stephen, can I ask you, it sounds like you're in the business today. How would you see an Alberta managed pension plan asset base? How would you see it? How would you want to see it managed?
Well, I would expect to see some sort of independent panel that is government free from government influence, that could say these are the proper investments, these are where we'd like to see our mix going, these are where the new trends are. I mean, even on the Standard & Poor's index, most investors are getting 10 to 11% without even trying. So, I mean, the market returns have been there for decades. I think the CPP is poorly managed. The Quebec pension plan is abysmal, if you ask me, but there's so much more room. I think I'm always leery of governments managing investment funds. I don't like government bloat and bureaucrats making decisions. I would like to see a private equity firm have some involvement in this, or at least be consulted on it with an independent panel, regardless of which government political group is running the Alberta panel. That's safeguards and checks should be in place for all of that, but you know, it needs to be someone that has the perspective to get outside of Canada and look at world markets, in my opinion, to see where the best investments are.
So is it fair to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you want it, A, independent, B, you want it to be fully accountable and transparent, and that they've got to think not just in our backyard, but across the country, across the continent, and think globally to get those best possible investment returns, and that politicians would not, underscore not, be part of that decision making. Is that a fair summary?
Correct. I mean, politicians can be good at many things, but investments are not one of them. It should be an advisory panel of some sort. I am very interested in making sure that we keep some sort of goal of keeping Alberta funds in Alberta. It was mentioned at the outset that there would be employment opportunities and jobs produced in Alberta because of this. So, I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be investing in ourselves either. We can do that by taking out of the CPP and putting back into an APP, which is just common sense.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments.
Thanks very much for that. The next question comes in from a listener online. This is from Brad. And Brad says, the current CPP benefits are a joke. Would keeping the premiums the same and increasing the benefits be a consideration? So, Jim, I'll let you start on that one. Please go ahead.
Well, I take it that Brad would be an advocate for keeping premiums the same and possibly seeing an increase in benefits. There was a song in my youth saying, I never promised you a rose garden, Brad, but the CPP never promised you the whole rose garden, just part of it. And today at a maximum of $1,300 per month, for some, that's a very, very important check that comes to them every month. But that's what the government has put out, is that if there is enough that comes to Alberta in the negotiations, the Morneau-Chappelle report says it's over $330 billion, that will determine how much benefits could possibly go up and how much contributions could possibly drop, or a combination of both. But for a number of callers tonight, clearly matters, and before they go to a vote, they want to know what that number is. But clearly the government has suggested that benefits could go up and contributions could go down.
Thanks very much, Jim. Moving along to our very next question. This is submitted, this is a live question from Ron. Ron's listening live tonight from Lethbridge. Ron, go ahead. Your line is now open.
Thank you. My concern is I'm very disillusioned with our federal government and the way they manage our resources. It has been an absolute joke as far as where we've gone over the last 7 years and the cost of the average person's cost in living in our various cities. How do I say this in a nice way? Well, you're laughing, but it's
Tell it like
fact.
it is. Tell it like it is, Ron. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm a senior person. Okay, I have worked over 55 years, and I'm retired now due to an accident. But what I paid in my Canada pension plan deductions, as well as the 85 employees that I had, I paid into that. I look at the investment of that amount of money at what we're talking about, this 10% number, which is very real in today's world, what that would have been given me per month as opposed to what I receive now. And it's very, very frustrating. I attended a conference as a chosen individual in high school, and it was a one prairie province. So we're talking about the abuse that we've been getting with federal government 55 years ago. It hasn't changed. And I'm looking ahead that I have higher faith in our provincial election, our provincial officials, than I do with the ones that are in Ottawa, because we have no say. Nothing happens. We get promised and it doesn't happen. And it's happened for years and years and multiples of elections. So that's the part that gets me a little bit upset. And I'd like to see our money through the pension plan, as well as any other investment plan, being managed and dealt with by our local elected officials. I see, as the previous caller said about investing back in Alberta, we need a $100 million bridge in Lethbridge. There's an investment. It'll get a guaranteed rate of return. It's solid. It's fixed. I mean, that is a good investment from my perspective. And this is the kind of thing that we need to use to stimulate the economy. The reduction in premiums for the employee as well as the employer is going to stimulate business in our province. And that's what we need. So many people have been leaving that because it's difficult. Look at the oil industry. I mean, it just decimated it. So these are the kind of things that made us a have province. I'm sure without the transfer payments that have been going for the past 50 or 60 years to Ottawa, the rest of the country would have a heck of a problem having to survive with their social programs. These are all things that worry me. I don't want any way that the federal government can manage that fund. It will disappear. We had 1,000 tons of gold in reserve in the Treasury. There's none now. It's gone. It was made into coins and sold around the world. Where's the accounting for it? Where did the money go? Nobody knows. These are things that really, really bother me. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in this being a conversation that will bring us forward in our current situation.
Ron, thanks for your comments tonight. You expressed a view that we've heard from a few people, but you've expressed it very well. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Jim. Going ahead to another live listener. This is Wade. Wade's listening tonight live from Tabor. Wade, go ahead. Your line's open.
Yeah, I thank you for taking my call and for the comments. And earlier there was expression that somehow we would not be supporting Canada if we somehow did our own pension plan. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but equalization payments are the process in which we support Canada. As I'm recently retired, and I paid my CPP contributions with the expectation that those contributions and the investments would come back to me. And I just feel like somehow we've associated the CPP, with our contribution to Canada, which I think is not a valid point. And I agree with the other caller that if we can stimulate the economy, people, costs are going up, retirees, fixed income, if we can help them in any way we can. It's really the individual who contributed as well as the employer. Anyways, those are some of my comments. But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't equalization payments the way we support the provinces, other provinces in Canada?
Wayne?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what equalization was set up for. I mean, the province of Alberta contributes to the Confederation in many other ways. The fact that our taxes, we contribute disproportionately more in terms of income taxes paid, and then federal government gets to use those taxes to spend wherever they wish. And so that's first in terms of the federal government. And then secondly, yes, the equalization program is one that was set up to take from the sort of have provinces and redistribute to the have-not provinces. And that was something that the Fair Deal panel addressed, and the previous premier tried to implement with the referendum that he held. But we haven't seen any results from that yet. But equalization is indeed what was set up for redistributing the wealth across the country.
And Moyne, just to add to that, there's no shortage of ways that Albertans, not the Alberta government, but Albertans contribute to the coffers of Ottawa, therefore to the rest of Canada. Whether it's in agriculture, where Wade's from, Tabor country is fabulous farming country, and those farmers and the suppliers and those in the industry there pay taxes. The same with oil and gas and wind farms and solar farms, and those in the forestry business, and those who run consumer shops so people walk in and buy groceries or buy stuff every day. We are fortunate to have profitable businesses in this province, and we are not generous. We are good Canadians, and we comply with the law, and we pay taxes. So that's not going to change. And having the government do some arithmetic to show that this one program, this Canada Pension Plan program, has shown there to be some over contributions by Albertans, not by the government, but by Albertans, is not an unfair bit of accounting to do, so that Albertans realize that they are major contributors to the rest of the country.
Thanks again, Jim. This is going to be the final question for this evening, and I will go ahead and read it. This is from Narwa, listening from Lethbridge. I will go ahead and read. Will the APP be more beneficial than the CPP? So perhaps I'll start with you, Jim, and if the other members of the panel have more to share on that, that would be a great opportunity. Go ahead.
I'd certainly welcome the others to join me, but Narwa, I would benefit to hear your comment. Do you think it would benefit Canada, or if it benefit Alberta? And frankly, I find it an intriguing opportunity that a sum of money of be it 150 or be it $300 billion, that whatever the number that comes back to create an Alberta pension plan, if Albertans choose to make it happen, that infusion into the investment sector in Alberta, the financial sector, and all the opportunities, and as Ron identified and Brad identified, that could have a ripple effect across the province. If Albertans agreed to it, I think it would be something that would serve us well, as long as the government put it together with many of the conditions and concerns that you've raised here tonight, that those are addressed and kept in mind. Mary and Moyne?
I think well said, Jim. Thank you. You gathered my thoughts there.
I agree.
Anything? Okay. All right, Sarah.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. I'd like to actually offer the opportunity to you to share some closing remarks and thank the panel for their participation this evening. So, Jim, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for moderating so well tonight. First of all, to all of you who joined in on the call, thank you for for your comments, your questions. I'm afraid we probably answered more questions than we heard comments tonight, and we'll try to fix that so we can hear more of your ideas. But it's up to you to help us write our report, and you've been helpful tonight. Thank you to Moyne and Mary for your insight and careful responses tonight. This is the second time we've ever done this, so we're still a little rusty, I'll admit. We have 3 more town hall meetings after tonight that will take place in November. They'll be on our website. And then we'll be having a series of face-to-face meetings in December. Our first round will be in December, likely in Edmonton and Calgary, possibly outside of those 2 centers, so that people can talk with us face-to-face and talk with one another face-to-face. And you'll see more about those details coming along. But the purpose of these first 5 meetings is really to help all of us to rinse and soak in the idea and the issues around an Alberta pension plan. You've been helpful tonight. Please keep an eye on the albertapensionplan.ca website, where we'll do a better job of putting up Q&A, questions and answers to many of the questions or comments that you made tonight, so that there's just that much more information that we all have to be able to consider before we make this important decision. But again, thank you to all of us and all of you at headquarters who've helped us to navigate tonight. And we'll look forward to hearing from Albertans again when we meet again in November. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. And for those of you, you've been listening to this telephone town hall with the Alberta Pension Plan Public Engagement Panel, including panel chair Jim Dinning and panel members Mary Ritchie and Moyen Yaha. For more information about those panel members, including their biographies, you can visit albertapensionplan.ca. For information, including answers to your questions, how to register for a future town hall, or to have your say and complete the survey, once again, I encourage you to visit albertapensionplan.ca. We will be back again on Thursday, November 9th at 6:30 p.m. and you can continue the conversation by joining us for that telephone town hall. Again, on behalf of the Alberta Pension Plan Public Engagement Panel, thank you for your participation and good night.